The morning sky over New Seoul burned red with smoke and fire. Tae-min stood on the broken walls of the last free city on planet Kepler 442b, watching the enemy advance like a dark wave across the dead landscape. 3 months ago, this world had been green and beautiful with crystal cities reaching toward the stars. Now it looked like hell itself. The Vorthak had come without warning. Their ships had filled the sky like angry clouds blocking out the sun. Their warriors moved across the ground in endless streams of black, chittering death. Each Vorthak soldier stood 7 feet tall with razor-sharp claws, mandibles that could bite through steel and armor that seemed to eat light itself. They moved fast, they hit hard, and they never stopped. Coming Tae-min had been a simple commander of the city guard when the invasion began. Now he was the highest-ranking officer left alive on the entire planet. His blue skin was covered in scars from countless battles, his uniform torn and stained. With blood both his own and that of his enemies, he carried an energy rifle that had once been bright silver but was now blackened from overuse. Behind him, the city walls showed the damage of 3 months of constant fighting. Massive holes had been blown through the reinforced concrete by Vorthak plasma cannons. Emergency repair crews had tried to patch them with metal plates and force fields, but everyone knew these fixes would not last much longer. The enemy was too strong, too many, too hungry, Lieutenant. Sora ran up the stairs to his position, carrying a data pad in her shaking hands. She was young, maybe 25 years old, with the bright green eyes that all Keplers had when they were born. But now those eyes held only fear and exhaustion. Her voice cracked when she spoke. Commander, the outer defense grid just went down completely. The Vorthak are massing for another assault. We count at least 50,000 of them moving toward the eastern gate. Tae-min took the data pad and studied the numbers. Each red dot on the screen represented 10 enemy soldiers. The screen was almost completely red. He had 200 defenders left, 200 against 50,000. The math was simple, and it was hopeless. How many civilians are still in? The bunkers, he asked. About 8,000 in the main shelter, and maybe 2,000 scattered in the smaller ones. Sora replied, most of them are families with children. The food supplies will last maybe 1 more week. Tae-min nodded and handed back the data pad. He had stopped thinking about food supplies weeks ago. If they lasted another day, it would be a miracle. The Vorthak did not take prisoners. They consumed everything they conquered. Every person, every animal, every plant. Everything became food for their endless swarm. Through his binoculars, he could see the enemy preparing for their final assault. Vorthak warriors were grouping into attack formations, while their flying units circled overhead like vultures. The ground shook under the weight of their heavy walkers, massive insect-like machines with plasma cannons mounted on their backs. Each walker could level a building with 1 shot. The Keplers had fought bravely. Everyone said so. The Planetary Defense Force had held out longer than anyone expected. They had destroyed thousands of enemy soldiers, and they had saved millions of civilians in the evacuation ships that escaped in the first weeks. But courage and determination could only do so much against an enemy that seemed to have no limits. Remember when we thought the Galactic Council would send help? Sora said quietly. Staring at the approaching swarm, Tae-min remembered. He remembered sending desperate messages across the galaxy begging for military support. He remembered waiting by the communication console for replies that never came. The few responses they did receive were all the same. We regret that we cannot provide assistance at this time. Your situation has been classified as a total loss. Please prepare for evacuation. But there had been no evacuation ships left. The Vorthak had destroyed the spaceports in the first week. They had shot down every ship that tried to leave the atmosphere. The people of Kepler 442b were trapped on their own world, watching it die piece by piece. The emergency sirens started wailing across the city. The sound echoed off the broken buildings and empty streets, filling the air with mechanical screams that matched the fear in every defender's heart. This was the sound they had all learned to hate, the sound that meant another attack was beginning. Taman checked his rifle one more time. The energy cell showed 12% charge. He had maybe 30 shots left. After that, he would have to rely on his sidearm, and after that, his knife. It would not be enough, but it was all he had. All units to defensive positions, he spoke into his communicator. Remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every person in those bunkers. We are fighting for our children. We are fighting for our world. The response came back from his scattered forces. Ready, sir. We will hold the line. But even as they said the words, everyone knew it was not true. The line had been breaking for months, shrinking smaller and smaller, until now it was just the walls of one city. The Vorthak had taken everything else, every other settlement, every military base, every piece of ground that their people had called home. The first wave of enemy flyers appeared over the eastern wall, moving fast and low. Their wings beat the air with a sound like thunder, and their eyes glowed red in the smoke. They carried weapons that fired streams of acid, and their claws could tear through metal like paper. Kepler anti-aircraft guns opened, fire sending bright lines of energy into the sky, but there were too many targets. Taman watched as one of the enemy flyers broke through the defensive fire and dove toward a group of his soldiers. The creature landed with a crash that cracked the concrete and immediately began attacking with its claws. The defenders fought back with everything they had, but the Vorthak was too fast, too strong. 3 good soldiers died in less than 10 seconds. This was how it always went. The Keplers fought with honor and skill, but the Vorthak fought like wild animals. They used their claws and teeth as much as their weapons. They moved without fear because they did not seem to understand what fear was. They just attacked and attacked until everything in front of them was dead. The main assault began as the sun reached its highest point. Thousands of Vorthak warriors charged across the open ground toward the city walls, while their air support provided cover from above. The defenders opened fire. With everything they had, rifles, cannons, missile launchers, anything that could hurt the enemy. The noise was incredible, like the world itself was screaming. But for every Vorthak that fell, 5 more took its place. They climbed over the bodies of their own dead without slowing down. They used fallen warriors as shields and stepping stones. They seemed to view death as just another tool of war, something to be used rather than feared. Taman found himself thinking about his daughter. She had been evacuated on one of the last ships to escape the planet. He hoped she was safe somewhere far away. He hoped she would grow up and have children of her own. He hoped someone would tell her that her father had died fighting for something important. The eastern wall exploded in a shower of concrete and metal as Vorthak heavy weapons found their target. A section 50 meters wide simply disappeared, leaving a gap that the enemy immediately began pouring through. Kepler defenders rushed to plug the breach, but they were badly outnumbered. The end was coming fast now. Then something impossible happened. High above the battle, new ships appeared in the sky. They were not Vorthak vessels, and they were not Kepler ships either. They were something else entirely, dark angular craft that moved with deadly grace through the smoke and flame. These newcomers immediately began attacking the Vorthak forces with weapons that seemed to tear reality itself apart. Taman stared in amazement as one of the mysterious ships destroyed an entire formation of enemy flyers with a single shot. What were these vessels? Who was flying them, and why were they helping? The answer would change everything. The unknown ships dropped through the burning sky like falling stars. Their hulls were black as space itself, and covered with strange markings that seemed to shift and move in the light. They were not like any vessels in the galactic databases, sleek and predatory, with weapons that hummed with barely contained power. These ships moved through the Vorthak formations like sharks through a school of fish, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Captain Hyunwoo of the reconnaissance unit pressed his binoculars against his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. The new arrivals were cutting through enemy forces that had seemed unstoppable just minutes before Vorthak heavy cruisers that could level mountains were exploding. Like firecrackers under the assault of weapons he could not even identify. "Look at that!" Jin-A whispered from beside him, pointing at the sky where one of the mysterious fighters was dancing between 3 Vorthak interceptors. The enemy pilots were good, but this newcomer was something else entirely. It moved like it could predict what the Vorthak would do before they did it. In seconds, all 3 enemy craft were falling toward the ground in pieces. The first of the dropships landed in the main square with a sound like thunder. The impact cracked the ancient stone and sent clouds of dust rolling through the air. When the dust cleared, figures emerged from the craft wearing armor that looked like it had been forged from midnight itself. Their helmets hid their faces behind dark visors that reflected the firelight like mirrors. Their weapons were unlike anything the Keplers had ever seen, long and angular with energy cells that pulsed with blue light. Tae-min ran down from the wall, toward the landing zone, his heart pounding with hope and fear. The newcomers moved with perfect coordination, spreading out to secure the area with the efficiency of a machine. Each soldier knew exactly where to go and what to do without any visible communication. It was like watching a single mind controlling multiple bodies. The lead figure removed his helmet, revealing a face that made Tae-min stop in surprise. It was humanoid like a Kepler, but different. The skin was pale instead of blue. The hair was brown instead of green, and the eyes were a strange color that seemed to shift between gray and blue. But the most shocking thing was the expression of calm confidence on this being's face. He looked at the battle raging around them like, "It was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I am Colonel Park of the Human Expeditionary Force." The being said in perfect Kepler language, though his accent was strange. "We received your distress call. Sorry, we are late to the party." Before Tae-min could respond, a group of Vorthak warriors burst through the breach in the eastern wall. Their claws gleamed with fresh blood and their mandibles clicked with hunger. These were the creatures that had terrorized an entire planet for months, the unstoppable, killers that ate everything in their path. The human soldiers reacted without hesitation. Their weapons fired beams of energy that did not just kill the Vorthak, they completely destroyed them. The first enemy warrior simply vanished in a flash of light, leaving only a small pile of ash where it had been standing. The second lost its head in a spray of superheated plasma. The third tried to run, but another beam caught it in the back, and it fell forward as a smoking corpse. The entire attack lasted maybe 10 seconds. 20. Vorthak warriors that would have overwhelmed the remaining Kepler defenders were gone. Tae-min had watched his soldiers fight these same creatures for hours at a time, losing good people with every engagement. But these humans had ended the threat before he could even raise his rifle. "How did you do that?" Tae-min asked, his voice barely a whisper. Colonel Park smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We have been fighting insects like these for 200 years, General. We know exactly how to exterminate them." More human ships were landing throughout the city, disgorging soldiers and equipment at an incredible rate. These beings worked with mechanical precision, setting up defensive positions and treating wounded Keplers with medical technology that seemed almost magical. Injuries that would have meant death were healed in minutes. Soldiers who had been barely alive were back on their feet within an hour. Sergeant Min Ho led a squad of human Marines through the rubble-filled streets, hunting down Vorthak infiltrators that had broken through the defenses. These creatures had been terrorizing the civilian population for weeks, hiding in destroyed buildings and attacking anyone who came too close. But the humans found them with ease, using sensors that could detect enemy life signs through solid walls watch and learn, the sergeant told a group of Kepler soldiers who were following his team. This is how you clear a building. The humans moved, like water, flowing around obstacles and filling every space they used, explosives that could blow holes through reinforced walls, weapons that could fire around corners, and tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum fear in their enemies. When they found a group of Vorthak hiding in a collapsed store, they did not just kill them quickly. They used some kind of sonic weapon that made the creatures scream in agony before finishing them with precise shots to vital organs. Your people fight. Like you enjoy causing pain, observed Dr. Yunji, who was working alongside human medics in the emergency treatment center. We do not enjoy war, replied the human medic whose name tag read Daeho. But we are very good at it. My species has been at war with someone for our entire recorded history. We have learned that sometimes the only way to save lives is to be extremely efficient at ending them. The human medic was working on a Kepler child who had been badly injured in the fighting. His hands moved with incredible skill, using instruments that seemed to repair damage at the cellular level. The child who had been dying minutes before was now sleeping peacefully with new skin growing over her wounds. But it was the way the humans fought that truly amazed the Keplers. These beings did not just defend themselves. They attacked with calculated violence that made the Vorthak seem tame by comparison. Where the insects relied on numbers and brutal strength, the humans used technology and tactics that turned war into a science. By the time the sun set, the entire situation had reversed. The Vorthak, who had been preparing for their final assault on the city, were now in full retreat. Human fighters pursued them through the sky, while ground forces pushed them back with weapons that could kill at ranges the insects had never imagined possible. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable just hours before were running like frightened animals. But the real shock came when Colonel Park explained their mission to the surviving Kepler leadership in what remained of the city hall. The building had been hit by enemy fire multiple times, but the humans had already begun repairs using some kind of construction robots that worked. Faster than any crew of living workers, we are not just here to save your city, Park said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. We are here to eliminate the Vorthak presence from this entire sector. No negotiations, no mercy, no survivors. They chose to be monsters, so we will treat them exactly like monsters. General Taemin felt a chill run down his spine. The way this human spoke about extermination was casual, almost bored, like he was discussing the weather, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he meant every word. These beings had not come to drive off the invaders, they had come to commit genocide. What does that mean exactly? Asked Dr. Yoon-ji-it. Means, Park replied, checking something on a handheld device, that by this time, tomorrow there will not be a single living Vorthak within 50 light years of this planet. We brought the tools necessary to make sure of that. Outside the damaged windows, human soldiers were setting up weapons that looked like they belonged in the nightmares of gods. Massive cannons that hummed with barely contained energy, missile launchers that could probably destroy entire city blocks, and something that looked like it could crack a moon in half. The Keplers had thought they understood war, but these humans were showing them that they had barely scratched the surface. The humans had not come as saviors. They had come as exterminators, and the Vorthak were about to learn what it meant to face a species that had turned killing into an art form. Dawn broke over New Seoul with a strange silence. The sounds of battle that had filled the air for months were gone, replaced by the steady hum of human machinery and the occasional burst of distant weapons fire. The Vorthak who had surrounded the city were nowhere to be seen. Instead, human patrols moved through the ruins with the confidence of apex predators reclaiming their territory. Taemin stood on the rebuilt section of the eastern wall, watching human engineers work their magic on the damaged fortifications. These beings had technology that seemed to bend reality itself. Broken concrete flowed back together like liquid metal, walls grew stronger than they had ever been, and weapon systems appeared as if summoned from thin air. The city that had been dying yesterday was becoming a fortress today. Sergeant Min Ho led another patrol through the abandoned districts, hunting for any Vorthak that might still be hiding in the rubble. His squad moved with the easy confidence of soldiers who knew they were the most dangerous things on the battlefield. They carried weapons that could punch through tank armor and wore sensors that could detect enemy heartbeats from half a kilometer away. "Check out Sector 7, Min Ho told, his team pointing toward a collapsed shopping center. "We got movement signatures down there. Probably a pack of workers trying to dig in and hide." The human soldiers approached the building like they were going hunting for sport rather than fighting for their lives. When they found the Vorthak nest hidden in the basement, they did not just kill the creatures. They did it in a way that would send a message to any others that might be listening. The screams that echoed from the building were not entirely from the aliens. "Your people are very thorough," observed Captain Bora, who had been assigned to follow human operations and report back to Kepler Command. She watched as the soldiers emerged from the building carrying strange devices that they planted around the perimeter. "Those are pheromone broadcasters," Min Ho explained casually. "They will tell any Vorthak in the area exactly what happened to the nest down there and exactly what will happen to them if they do not run very far away." Very quickly, Dr. Yunji was beginning to understand that the humans did not just fight wars, they studied them. Every soldier carried computers that analyzed enemy behavior patterns, strengths, and weaknesses. They had detailed files on 17 different types of Vorthak and specific tactics for dealing with each one. It was like they had turned killing into a science. "How long have your people been fighting these creatures?" she asked Medic Deho as they worked together to treat wounded civilians. 237 years, he replied without looking up from his patient. "We encountered them when we were expanding into the Outer Rim. They tried to do to us what they did to you. The first few colonies got completely wiped out before we figured out how to kill them properly. What changed? We stopped thinking of them as people," Deho said simply. "We started treating them like a disease that needed to be cured. The galaxy is a lot quieter when you approach problems that way." The medic was using some kind of healing device that could repair broken bones in minutes and regrow lost tissue in hours. The injured Kepler civilians who had been prepared to die were now sitting up and asking for food. It was miraculous. But the casual way the humans spoke about genocide made Yunji feel cold inside. Meanwhile, human forces were spreading across the planet with mechanical efficiency. They did not just drive the Vorthak away, they systematically destroyed every nest, every breeding, ground every food source that the creatures might use. Orbital bombardment platforms appeared in the sky and began sterilizing entire continents with weapons that could burn the very ground. Major Sung Min briefed the Kepler leadership on human military doctrine in what had once been the city council chamber. The room had been completely rebuilt in just 2 days, using human construction technology that could shape matter at the molecular level. Everything was perfect, clean, and sterile. "Like a surgical operating room, your people fight like soldiers," he told them, standing in front of a holographic display that showed the planetary situation. "That is honorable, but it is not efficient. We fight like exterminators. We do not want to defeat the Vorthak. We want to make them extinct in this entire region of space." The display showed the spread of human forces across Kepler 442b. Red zones marked areas where the aliens had been completely eliminated. Yellow zones showed active combat operations. Green zones were areas that had been declared permanently secured. The planet was turning green at an incredible rate. "But how can you be so certain they will not return?" asked General Tae Min, because Major Sung Min smiled that cold human smile. "We are not just killing the ones that are here. We are making sure that any Vorthak who survive will carry the memory of what we did to them back to their home worlds. When word spreads about what happened here, no swarm will ever come to this sector again. The humans had brought weapons that the Keplers had never imagined, chemical agents that made Vorthak larvae unable to mature, biological weapons that disrupted their communication systems. Psychological warfare tools that could drive entire swarms into madness. They were not just fighting a war. They were conducting an extermination campaign with the efficiency of a factory assembly line. Captain Hyun-woo accompanied a human strike team to the ruins of Old Busan, where intelligence suggested a major Vorthak command center was hidden. The humans moved through the destroyed city like ghosts, finding enemy positions with sensors that could detect them through solid rock. When they located the command bunker, they did not assault it directly. Instead, they used something called a molecular acid bomb. The weapon did not explode. It simply converted all organic matter within a specific area into a corrosive liquid that ate through everything else. The Vorthak commanders inside. The bunker died screaming as their own bodies turned against them, and the sound was broadcast across the planetary communication network for every surviving alien to hear. "This is psychological warfare," Colonel Park explained to the horrified Kepler officers. "We want the survivors to know exactly what fate awaits them if they stay on this planet. Fear is a weapon just like any other, and we have learned to use it very effectively." By the end of the first week, Vorthak resistance had collapsed completely. The creatures that had seemed unstoppable were fleeing in panic, abandoning equipment supplies, and even their own wounded in their desperate rush to escape human forces found evidence of mass suicides as entire units chose death rather than face capture. The insects had conquered hundreds of worlds through sheer brutality, but they had never faced an enemy that was more brutal than they were. The planetary communication networks that the Vorthak used to coordinate their forces had become tools of human psychological warfare. Every frequency carried recordings of what happened to captured aliens. Every data stream included footage of human weapons in action. Every message was a promise of death to any creature that remained. On the planet, Lieutenant Sora found herself both grateful and terrified as she watched human soldiers work. They had saved her world and her people, but they had done it by becoming something worse than the monsters they fought. These beings did not just kill efficiently, they killed creatively, finding new ways to cause fear and pain with every engagement. The final Vorthak stronghold was located in the northern mountains, where the aliens had built a fortress inside a dormant volcano human. Forces surrounded it with weapons that could have cracked the mountain in half, but instead they chose a more subtle approach. They pumped the complex full of a gas that slowly converted the atmosphere into acid. The Vorthak inside died over the course of 3 days as their environment became increasingly hostile. Every breath burned their lungs. Every surface became corrosive to their skin. They tried to surrender, but the humans had no interest in prisoners. By the time the gas cleared, there was nothing left but empty armor and organic residue. "Your people do not believe in mercy, do they?" asked Dr. Yunji as she watched the final assault through remote cameras. "Mercy is for people," replied Colonel Park. "Monsters get what monsters deserve." The tide had not just turned, it had become a tsunami of destruction, washing away every trace of the Vorthak presence on Kepler 442b. The humans had not come as liberators. They had come as a force of nature, and nothing could stand against them. The transformation of New Soul was like watching magic happen, but magic performed by beings who understood exactly how every trick worked. Human engineers swarmed over the damaged city with machines that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Buildings that had been piles of rubble yesterday were standing tall and strong today. Streets that had been crater-filled death traps were now smooth and clean. The humans did not just repair things, they improved them. Captain Bora stood in what had been the ruins of the Central District, watching a construction robot that was easily 3 times her height. The machine moved with surprising grace, considering its size, placing building components with precision that no living crew could match. Its operator was a young human woman named Specialist Wu Jin, who controlled the massive robot like it was an extension of her own body. "How long will it take to rebuild the entire city?" Bora asked. "Maybe 2 weeks for basic infrastructure," replied Wu Jin without taking her eyes off her work. "Another month for all the details. We brought enough equipment to build 3 cities this size from scratch if we needed to." Bora found that hard to believe until she saw the human supply ships, landing every few hours. Each vessel carried enough material and machinery to construct entire city blocks. The humans had not just brought soldiers to fight the Vorthak, they had brought everything needed to rebuild an entire civilization, but it was the weapons that truly amazed and terrified the Keplers. The humans had set up something they called an orbital strike platform in the mountains north of the city. When Bora asked what it did, Wu Jin simply pointed to a Vorthak hive complex, 20 kilometers away, that intelligence had missed during the initial sweeps. "Watch this," the specialist said. Pressing a button on her control panel, a beam of pure energy connected the satellite platform to the ground for exactly 3 seconds when it ended the hive, and everything within a kilometer radius had been reduced to a perfectly circular crater of molten glass. The heat signature was visible from orbit and would probably still be glowing in a week. "Your species builds weapons like this regularly," Bora asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This is actually one of our smaller planetary bombardment systems," Wu Jin replied as casually as if she were discussing the weather. "We have rules about what we can use on inhabited planets. The really dangerous stuff stays in space where it cannot hurt innocent people." Bora did not want to think about what weapons the humans considered too dangerous for planetary use. If this was their small-scale option, what did their real arsenal look like? The thought made her feel sick. Dr. Unji was learning similar lessons in the medical center where human doctors worked alongside Kepler physicians. The humans had technology that could heal injuries that would have been fatal just days before, but they also had detailed knowledge of anatomy that came from a very different source. "You know exactly how to hurt people because you know exactly how to heal them," she observed, watching Dr. Young Soo work on a patient who had been caught in a Vorthak acid attack. "Knowledge is knowledge," the human doctor replied. "We study biology to save lives, but the same information tells us how to end lives efficiently if necessary. My species learned long ago that the best doctors often make the most effective killers." The human medical equipment could regrow lost limbs, repair brain damage, and even reverse some types of poisoning. But Yunji noticed that every device could also be used as a weapon with minor modifications. The healing ray, that regrew tissue, could be tuned to cause cancer. The surgical nanobots that repaired cells could be programmed to destroy them instead. Major Sung Min gave daily briefings to Kepler military leaders on human tactics and strategy. The sessions were held in a conference room that the humans had built underground using technology that could carve through solid rock like it was clay. Everything was clean and efficient, with holographic displays that could show battlefield situations in perfect detail. "Your people think of war as a contest between soldiers," he told them, standing in front of a 3-dimensional map of the planet. "We think of war as a process to be optimized. Every engagement is analyzed, every weapon is tested, every tactic is refined until we achieve maximum efficiency." The displays showed human forces moving across the planet with mechanical precision. Each unit knew exactly where to go and what to do based on real-time intelligence gathered by sensors that could detect enemy activity from orbit. The Vorthak had no secrets from these beings, no hiding places, no safe zones. But the most disturbing part was how the humans thought about their enemies. They did not see the Vorthak as another species. They saw them as a problem to be solved. The aliens were studied, categorized, and processed like samples in a laboratory. Every weakness was cataloged. Every behavior pattern was analyzed. Every biological function was mapped and exploited. Sergeant Min Ho showed Kepler soldiers how to set up what he called efficient killing zones. The humans had studied Vorthak movement patterns and knew exactly how the creatures would react to different types of terrain obstacles and threats. They used this knowledge to create traps that were both deadly and psychologically devastating. The key is to make them suffer before they die. Minho explained as his team placed devices around an abandoned factory complex. We want the ones that escape to carry the memory back to their friends. Fear spreads faster than any virus, and it is much more effective at controlling behavior. The traps used Vorthak pheromones to lure the insects into kill zones, but these were not quick deaths. The humans had designed the weapons to keep their victims alive while broadcasting their distress signals, which attracted more targets. It was a cycle of suffering that could continue for hours, drawing in every alien within kilometers. "This is torture," protested Lieutenant Sora as she watched a group of Vorthak writhing in an energy net that slowly cooked them alive. "This is war," replied Sergeant Minho without emotion. "They ate your children alive. They turned your people into breeding stock for their larvae. You want to show them mercy. That is your choice. But mercy does not win wars against monsters." The psychological effect on the surviving Vorthak was devastating. These creatures had conquered hundreds of worlds through sheer numbers and overwhelming violence. But they had never faced an enemy that was more violent than they were. Human forces began finding entire units that had committed mass suicide rather than face capture. The aliens communicated through a form of telepathic network that shared memories and emotions across their swarms. This meant that every death, every moment of pain, every creative execution was experienced by thousands of other creatures. The humans were not just killing Vorthak bodies, they were breaking their collective mind. Dr. Young-Soo worked with Kepler scientists to study the alien psychology using captured specimens that the human soldiers brought back alive. The research was conducted in a laboratory that had been built specifically for this purpose, deep underground, where the screams could not be heard by the civilian population. The Vorthak are a hive mind species, he explained to Dr. Yunji as they watched the test subjects through reinforced glass. They share experiences across their entire swarm through quantum entanglement in their brain tissue. When we cause extreme trauma to one individual, thousands of others feel it as well. What does that mean for the war? Yunji asked. Though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer, it means we can defeat them without killing all of them. We just need to kill enough of them in sufficiently creative ways to break their collective will to fight. Young-Soo replied. Every battlefield becomes a weapon against their entire species. The humans had turned war into a science, and they had been studying it for longer than most species had existed. They knew exactly how to break an enemy, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. They did not just win battles, they destroyed their opponents' capacity to even think about fighting. By the end of the second week, Vorthak resistance had collapsed across the entire planet. The few survivors were fleeing toward their ships in orbit, but even that escape route was being cut off. Human warships had arrived in the system and were systematically destroying any vessel that tried to leave. The aliens were trapped on a world that had become their graveyard. The final lesson came when human forces located the Vorthak Queen ship hiding in the asteroid belt. Instead of destroying it quickly, they used a weapon that slowly converted the ship's atmosphere into corrosive acid. The Queen died over 3 days, broadcasting her agony to every Vorthak in the system. When the Queen finally expired, the effect on the remaining aliens was immediate and total. Every Vorthak on the planet either fled in mindless panic or simply dropped dead from psychological shock. The hive mind that had held their species together for millions of years shattered, like glass. The humans had not just won a war, they had committed genocide with the efficiency of a medical procedure, and they had done it all to save people they had never met before because their species had decided that some problems could only be solved with overwhelming violence. 3 weeks after the humans arrived, Kepler 442b was almost unrecognizable. The planet that had been a burning wasteland was now showing signs of new life. Human terraforming equipment worked day and night to repair the damage caused by months of war. Poisoned soil was cleaned, contaminated water was purified, and the very air itself was being restored to its original composition. But the Keplers were beginning to understand that their saviors were something far more dangerous than they had imagined. The humans did not just fight wars, they perfected them. Every engagement was studied. Every death was analyzed, every scream was recorded for future reference. These beings had turned killing into an art form, and they practiced it with the dedication of master craftsman. Lieutenant Sora accompanied Sergeant HFY on what the humans called a cleanup operation in the ruins of Old Busan. The city had been abandoned for months, but intelligence suggested that small groups of Vorthak might still be hiding in the underground tunnels. The human approach to this problem was typically efficient and completely horrifying. "We are not just hunting stragglers," HFY explained as her team set up equipment in the city center. "We are conducting a field test of new psychological warfare techniques. The data we collect here will be used to fight similar enemies on other worlds." The humans had developed what they called neural mapping technology that could track the emotional states of Vorthak through their telepathic network. When they found a group of aliens hiding in an old subway station, they did not simply kill them. Instead, they used sonic weapons that caused specific types of pain designed to create maximum psychological trauma. In anyone connected to the hive mind, Sora watched in horror as the captured Vorthak were subjected to precisely calculated torture. The humans had studied alien pain responses and knew exactly how to cause suffering that would echo through the entire species' telepathic network. Each scream was broadcast to thousands of other creatures hiding throughout the galaxy. "This is not warfare," she protested as the sounds echoed through the tunnels. "This is systematic torture." "This is how wars end," replied HFY without emotion. "We could spend years hunting down every Vorthak in the galaxy, or we can break their will to fight in a few weeks. Fear is a more efficient weapon than any bomb." The psychological effects were already visible across. The planet Vorthak units that had been fighting desperately just days before were now surrendering or committing suicide rather than face capture. The few aliens that remained alive spent their time hiding in the deepest caves they could find, too terrified to even search for food. Dr. Yunji worked with human xenobiologists to understand what was happening to the alien survivors. The research was conducted in a facility that had been built specifically for studying enemy psychology, complete with isolation chambers, monitoring equipment, and experimental tools that she preferred not to think about too carefully. "The Vorthak nervous system is designed for shared experience," explained Dr. Young-Soo as they observed a test subject through reinforced glass. "When one individual experiences extreme trauma, the entire local network feels a diluted version of that pain. Scale up the trauma, and you can affect millions of creatures simultaneously. But what does that do to them as a species?" Yunji asked. "It breaks them." Young-Soo replied simply, "A species that has relied on collective consciousness for millions of years cannot function when that network becomes a source of constant agony. We are not just killing them, we are making it impossible for them to exist as a unified force." The human doctor was using instruments that could measure brain activity, emotional responses, and even spiritual well-being in alien subjects. The data was being fed into computers that analyzed every aspect of Vorthak psychology, looking for new ways to cause maximum damage to their collective consciousness. Meanwhile, human forces were preparing for what Colonel Park called the final solution, the last major concentration of Vorthak on the planet. had barricaded themselves in a series of underground caves in the polar region. These aliens were the survivors of multiple failed escape attempts, and they had nowhere left to run. Instead of a direct assault, the humans chose to demonstrate the full extent of their technological superiority. They used machines that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level to slowly convert the caves into a death trap. The rock walls began secreting acid, the air became poisonous, and the very ground turned into quicksand that dissolved organic matter. The process took 72 hours, during which every moment of alien suffering was recorded and broadcast through their telepathic network. The Vorthak died slowly and in perfect coordination, with thousands of their species feeling every second of agony. The humans had turned their greatest strength, their collective consciousness, into their ultimate weakness. Captain Bora filed daily reports to what remained of the Kepler government, but she was finding it increasingly difficult to describe what she was witnessing. The humans were not just soldiers, they were scientists, conducting the largest psychological experiment in galactic history. Every action was calculated to produce maximum terror in their enemies. "Your people have fought the Vorthak for over 200 years, she said to Colonel Park during one of their briefings. How many worlds have they attacked in that time? 437, Park replied without hesitation. We keep detailed records of every encounter, every battle, every innovation in tactics or technology. The Vorthak have been responsible for the extinction of 43 different species before we learned how to stop them permanently. 40. 3 entire species. Unji had joined the conversation, and her voice was barely a whisper. The Vorthak do not negotiate, they do not retreat, and they do not show mercy, Park continued. They consume everything they encounter, turning entire civilizations into food for their expansion. We tried peaceful solutions for the first 50 years of contact. The result was the complete destruction of 16 human colonies and the deaths of over 2 billion people. The colonel activated a holographic display that showed the expansion of Vorthak territory over the past 3 centuries. Red zones marked worlds that had been completely consumed. Yellow zones showed active invasion sites, and tiny green dots represented successful human interventions. The galaxy was mostly red. So you decided to become worse than they are. Bora said, we decided to become effective. Park replied, we studied them, learned their weaknesses, and developed the tools necessary to ensure they could never threaten another innocent species. The methods are unpleasant, but the results speak for themselves. The humans had indeed become something terrible in their war against the Vorthak. They had developed weapons that could cause psychological damage across interstellar distances, tactics that relied on systematic torture, and strategies that treated entire species as problems to be solved rather than people to be reasoned with. But the alternative was extinction. The records that Park showed them contained footage from dozens of worlds that had fallen to the Vorthak entire civilizations, reduced to empty planets picked clean of all life cities that had been home to billions of people turned into feeding grounds for alien larvae children who had been used as incubators. For the next generation of warriors, the humans had looked at this pattern of destruction and made a choice. They would rather be monsters fighting for the right side than victims dying for noble principles. They had embraced the darkness of war so completely that even their enemies feared them. The final proof came when human scouts detected the approach of a Vorthak rescue fleet. A massive armada of ships carrying millions of warriors was heading toward Kepler 442b to reclaim what they considered their conquered territory. The aliens expected to find a planet full of fresh breeding stock. Instead, they found something that would haunt their species for generations. The human response was swift and absolute. They did not just destroy the incoming fleet. They did it in a way that would be remembered by every Vorthak in the galaxy. Each ship was disabled rather than destroyed, and its crew was subjected to precisely calculated psychological torture before being allowed to escape. The survivors carried with them the memory of what humans were capable of doing to their enemies. Within days, the word had spread through Vorthak's space. Kepler 442b was not just defended, it was protected by beings that made death itself seem like mercy. The planet that had once been marked for consumption was now avoided by every Vorthak in the galaxy. The humans had won not through superior numbers or better technology, but by becoming something that even monsters feared. They had saved the Keplers by embracing a level of ruthlessness that most species could not even imagine, and they had done it all with the calm efficiency of beings who had been perfecting the art of war for longer than most civilizations had existed. 6 months had passed since the humans first landed on Kepler 442b, and the transformation was complete. The planet that had been a dying wasteland was now more beautiful than it had ever been. Human terraforming technology had not just repaired the damage, it had improved everything. The soil was richer, the water was cleaner, and even the sky seemed brighter than before. New Sol stood as a monument to human engineering prowess. The city was larger than before, with buildings that reached toward the stars and transportation systems that could move millions of people with perfect efficiency. The humans had rebuilt everything, but they had also added their own improvements: defensive systems that could stop any invasion force weapons, platforms that could destroy threats from orbit, and sensor networks that could detect danger from light years away. General Taman stood on the observation deck of the new orbital defense station, looking down at the world he had helped save below. Kepler families were returning to their homes. Children played in parks that had been battlefields just months ago, and life was slowly returning to normal. But in the sky above, human warships maintained their patrol routes ready to respond to any threat with overwhelming force. "Your people are certainly thorough," he said to Colonel Park, who was standing beside him at the reinforced windows. The view showed the entire planet spread out below them like a living map, with cities glowing like jewels against the green and blue surface. "We have learned that half measures do not work against enemies, like the Vorthak Park," replied his voice calm and matter-of-fact. "Either you destroy them completely, or they come back stronger than before. There is no middle ground when dealing with monsters." The humans had indeed been thorough. They had not just driven off the Vorthak invasion, they had eliminated every trace of alien presence from the entire star system. Space stations that had been captured were destroyed rather than recaptured. Asteroid mining facilities that had been contaminated were sterilized with weapons that could melt solid rock. The humans wanted no possibility that their enemies could ever return, but the Keplers had learned something about their saviors that would stay with them forever. These beings were not heroes in any traditional sense. They were professional killers who happened to fight for the right side. Their methods were brutal, their weapons were terrifying, and their approach to warfare made the Vorthak seem almost civilized by comparison. Dr. Yunji had become the chief liaison between human forces and the Kepler government, a position that gave her access to information that sometimes kept her awake at night. The humans had shared some of their technology, medical advances, construction techniques, and defensive systems, but they had kept the really dangerous stuff to themselves. "Will your people stay?" she asked Colonel Park during one of their regular briefings. They were meeting in what had once been the city council chamber, but was now a high-tech command center filled with holographic displays and communication equipment that could reach across the galaxy. "Garrison will." Remain, Park replied, pointing to a